Ladies and gentlemen, Van Grubb is a Gold Star son of Lieutenant Colonel Wilmer Newlin, Newk Grubb, a U.S. Air Force pilot from the 20th Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron who was captured in Vietnam in 1966. He died in captivity. His mother, Evelyn Fowler Grubb, was a leading advocate for POW and MIAs, co-founding the National League of Families. Van honors his family's legacy by sharing their story and advocating for veterans and POW and MIA awareness. Mr. Grubb has agreed to sign copies of the book, You Are Not Forgotten, at the end of the event for a small donation, with all proceeds going to the DV Chapter 32, or 100% free for Vietnam veteran spouses. Please join me in welcoming Van Grubb.
Good evening, everybody. I can't tell you how proud I am to be here to speak to my heroes about my heroes. I'll let you know a little bit about me. I don't have a TV plugged in my house. I don't worship football stars or sports figures. Movie stars, they're great for entertainment, but it's our veterans that have made the difference in our country, and I thank you. I speak about patriotism, I speak about sacrifice, and I speak about forgiveness. My father, all he wanted to do when he was young was fly. My aunt told me that when he was about 10 years old, he took his allowance, went to the state fair, got on a crop duster, got home, and that's all he ever wanted to do. He found a way into the service when he attended Penn State by joining ROTC. That's where he met my mom. Despite both my grandparents being fraternity brothers, they hadn't met until college. My dad joined ROTC. Right after graduation, he was accepted in flight training for the United States Air Force. Our family's a lot like the other military families. Our siblings were where they were stationed at the time. I've got a brother, Jeff, was born when my father was in flight training in Texas. My next older brother, he was born in Toulouse-Rosières, France, when my father was in Europe. I was born in Ramstein Air Force Base. Yeah. And my younger brother, Roy, was born in Petersburg, Virginia. My father always wanted to fly, always wanted to be a service member, and was honored to do so. Now I'm going to talk about sacrifice. January 26, 1966, we were living in Petersburg, Virginia, after my father was stationed in Vietnam. We had moved to Petersburg to be close to my mom's mother who lived there. It was a snowy night, a foot of snow on the ground. We were out of school for the day, and there was a knock on the door. It was a taxi driver. He had a Western Union telegram. My mom knew right away. Take it back. I know what it says, take it back, but that couldn't be. It was a note saying that my father had been shot down and rescue mission was underway. And of course, the military showed up later and comforted my mom. She was upset. I was only almost 3 years old. That was my earliest memory. Never seen my mom cry like that before. 20 days after we were notified, somebody in Altoona, Pennsylvania called my mom, who grew up with my father, said, "Your husband's on the front page of our newspaper. He's been captured. He's alive." That gave us great hope. I mean, we went from thinking the worst to having pictures of him. Well, these pictures kept coming out. on the humane treatment of the POWs of my father. My mom was overjoyed, went from despair to hope, and did what other women had done who were in this circumstance through the Geneva Convention. You were supposed to be able to get packages and letters delivered through the Red Cross. Through the military, we got an address and the dimensions of the box we were allowed, and we'd send the box, and it would always come back non-deliverable. But that was not unusual at the time. Not many families in 1966 were getting any letters or postage from their loved one. But my mom, over the next 2 years, the only other person that she knew who was going through this circumstance was a fellow squadron member. His name was Alan Brunstrom. Alan Brunstrom was the wingman the day my father was shot down. Anytime they flew over North Vietnam on a secret mission like my father's, they flew 2 identical aircraft, which was a F-101 Voodoo. In case one got shot down, they'd have coordinates for possible rescue. Well, Alan Brunstrom was shot down 4 months after my father. Alan Brunstrom spent 6 years, 10 months in the Handle Hilton. I'm sorry, I get choked up sometime, but I'll be okay, believe me. My mom got a call from a woman called Mrs. Crow. She was a Navy wife. There was an organization called the Navy Wives. It was made by Sybil Stockdale. Sybil Stockdale was, her husband had been shot down, and he was the highest ranking officer of that area. So she would chair meetings for the Navy Wives. And they would help them to jump through the hoops, the legal hoops on how to arrange the financing when your husband is not there anymore as prisoner of war. It was a very difficult time. These women had hard times buying cars. You sure that's the car your husband would want? You go to buy a house. Well, are you sure that you can afford this since your husband's a prisoner of war? Or are you sure that this is the house that he wants? Can't you give him a call? Well, no, we couldn't give him a call. Very difficult situations for the women at that time. As more and more families were going through that circumstance, the Navy Wives developed into what is now known as the National League of Families, Prisoners of War Missing in Southeast Asia. My mom helped to open the first office in Washington, D.C. They realized, being just a little organization scattered around the country, they need to be centrally located where they could make a difference. They opened the office in Washington, D.C. In 1971, my mom was voted in as the national coordinator. During her time, she met with President Nixon and Henry Kissinger, and if need be, she would yell that at them both, and sometimes that happened, believe me, it did. She had the great honor of presenting one of the first POW MIA banners to Melvin Laird. It wasn't always a flag. What had happened is when they started the League, it's a nonprofit, they had to get an advertising agency in so they could tell them how to run this organization, and they said, well, you need bumper stickers, you need a banner that you can put on the podium so when you speak, people know who you are. And so they sent out a call. Everything was not through computers like it is now. It was either mail or long-distance phone calls. So the call went out, we need a banner, and somebody, her name is Miss Mary Hoff, she agreed to try to do the banner, approached Eamon Flagmaker, who said, well, you need to speak to Newt Heisley. He's a freelancer. I'm sure he'll help you out. Newt Heisley met with Mary Hoff, and he started making a banner, and he was having a little difficult time with coming up with the theme to the banner, but his son had come home from the service. He had hepatitis. He was very gaunt, and he was on leave until he could recuperate, and he was standing in the doorway with his son behind him, and Newt looked up and saw the silhouette. And that's how the silhouette ends up on the banner. The black and white. The black and white was, they always thought that the POW MIA situation should be a black and white situation. It should be nonpartisan. Everybody should be able to get behind it. And there's also a financial reason. One of the first big purchases the League did was this new machine called a Xerox machine. It could only print in black and white. So financially it made sense. They could print it on regular paper and have their banner on the piece of paper. The You Are Not Forgotten. Newt Heisley was a World War II South Pacific pilot. He looked down over the islands of the South Pacific and looked down on the beaches and then all the men down there, and he said, if I was to die down there, I would not want to be forgotten. And that's how the banner came to be. My mom was very proud to present one of the first banners in Melvin Laird at the Pentagon during the Week of Concern in 1971. She accomplished a lot, and one of the proudest things that she did a petition to the United Nations. They tried to do one on the humane treatment of the prisoners of war, but that went nowhere because that was happening on both sides. She said, well, let's do one for the families. They're torturing the families. We can't get mail delivered. Our husbands will think that we have forgotten them. Through the Red Cross, we were supposed to do this, and we hear about torture. Well, that made a big difference, and that was accepted. That put pressure on Vietnam. The men and the women of the men started getting packages delivered to their loved ones. It was a life-changing thing for us. Unfortunately, we never got a letter back from my father. We never got one word from my father, despite the pictures of him being used for 5 years on the humane treatment of the prisoners of war. 1973, the war was over. The men came home. Operation Homecoming, our prisoners of war came home and our troops came home. My father wasn't one of them. In 1974, Vietnam released 23 remains of men who had died in captivity, and we were one of the lucky families. My father's remains were returned at that time. And we were honored to have a big full military service at Arlington Cemetery, but then we had to start over. In 1977, we moved down to Florida, Satellite Beach, went to school, tried to live a normal life. We never really talked about what had happened in Vietnam. If my mom was asked, she'd say, well, my husband perished in Vietnam and left it at that. You can't start over if you keep bringing up the past. But in year 2000, my mom found she had cancer and knew her time was short and didn't want the brave women of the League to be forgotten. I can say my mom did this, my mom did that, and she did a lot, but it was the support of the 5,000 families she had behind her that enabled her to do what she did. She approached a local author, Carol Jost. Will you help me write the book, Carol? Carol agreed, not knowing that my mom had 3 big bins of every note that she had taken while she was a coordinator for the League until she got off the board of directors with the League in 1974. It took 5 years to write the book. The book was done but not published when my mom passed away. Carol did a real good job and sold a lot of books, but she passed several years ago, and I went, it was right before COVID when she passed, and I went a year after COVID started to the publisher of the book, and I said, Art Brown, how many books have been sold in the last couple of years? He said, well, with COVID and everything shut down, we've sold 8 copies. I said, well, I picked up 4 copies. I'm going to see what I can do. I gave away 4 books, and about a year later, Art Brown called me and said, Van, I'm retiring. What do you want to do with the unsold copies of the book? I said, well, Art, how many are there? He said, I've got 1,988. I said, well, Art, if I don't buy them, what would happen? He goes, I can't afford to keep them any longer and store them. I'll have to put them in the landfill. I was not having that. I bought 1,988 copies of my mom's book. The tribute to the women would not end up in a landfill. Now this is where my story takes a little twist. 2013, my brother was in Afghanistan. He was a contractor. There's not much to do on your time off. He went on the Arlington Cemetery website, and that's where you can download pictures of your loved one. And that's where my mom and dad are interred. He clicked the picture icon, and the first picture came up was an Asian man sitting in front of my mom and dad's tombstone with the Vietnamese-American dictionary in his lap. Click the next picture, and this man's at the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. at my dad's panel. And he messaged me, messaged my other brother. I got 3 brothers, Jeff's the oldest, Roland's next, myself, and then Roy. We had no idea who he was. Carol Jost, the co-author of my mom's book, didn't know who he was until a year later. I got a call from Carol. Said, I got a phone call from this guy. We think we know who the guy is who visited your mom at Arlington Cemetery and your dad. And I went, okay. So we set up a meeting, and door knocks at Carol Jost's house where we were at, and in walks an American. I'm like, well, this isn't the guy, right? It's not the guy. Well, he had a letter for us. Turns out his co-producer's fiance, they're married now, her husband fought for Vietnam, South Vietnam. His name's My Pham Duc. My Pham Duc had 3 brothers. 2 fought for the North, 2 fought for the South. Well, My Pham wanted to see one of the brothers fight for North Vietnam. His name's U Pham Duc. They brought him from Vietnam to America for a family reunion. Had nothing going on one day. They asked U Pham, what do you want to do? He said, well, I want to find somebody. I want to find Grubb. I said, who's Grubb? You don't know anybody in America. He says, I do. He was the first pilot our anti-aircraft unit shot down during the war, and we captured him. And that's the man that visited my parents at Arlington Cemetery. U Pham got back to Vietnam, realized, well, he was looking for my dad. As the pictures of my father after capture became very, very famous in Vietnam, and he was told at the end of the war that all the prisoners of war had been released alive. Well, my father only had a scraped knee. No reason he wouldn't be there, only to find my dad had died in captivity. He got back to Vietnam, talked to the other men from his unit, and realized my family had no idea what had happened, that we had no idea what happened to my father after capture, and wrote us a letter. It went sort of like this. Members of the Grubb family, my name is U Pham Duc. On January 26, 1966, we shot down the plane of your father, and we captured him. If you wish to come to Vietnam and hear our stories, we will treat you well. That's not an easy decision. I talked to the one man who might have an answer for me, and that was Alan Brunstrom. Called Alan Brunstrom. He was my dad's wingman, spent 6 years, 10 months in the Hanoi Hilton. Said, Alan, I gave him a lowdown, what's going on? Alan, what do you think? Should we go? Said, I think you should go back. I think you should go, Van. It might do you good. I went back. I went, Alan, you spent 6 years and 10 months in hell. Why would you go back? He said, it's easy. I wanted to see what the country looked like outside the wall. I went back. It was good for me. I think it might be good for you too. I said, well, if you can go, I can go for my first time. My family spent 3 weeks in Vietnam, meeting every living member of the anti-aircraft unit that was there the day my father was shot down. I've got to tell you a little bit about these men. 3 weeks in Vietnam with us. They left their home. They traveled from Saigon to Son Truc, to the battlefield where my father was shot down, to Hanoi. Would not let us buy their meals, would not accept a penny from us. All they wanted to do was give us information that we couldn't have gotten any other way after 50 years. It did me a lot of good to realize that it's not the people of Vietnam that I feared, it's their government. These guys were just soldiers. They want to wake up every day and feed their families. They want their children to be educated, just like we do. I had no fear. I walked through the city of Vietnam, get up in the morning with crows, with the roosters crowing, no matter where it was, Hanoi, Saigon, they had roosters everywhere. Go out and eat with the public. Never once had somebody come up and wave their finger in my face. You killed my father, you killed my... No, they came up and said, are you American? If they spoke English, you are American, can we get a picture with you? We love America. It's not quite what I expected. But when I got home, I was in for a little rude awakening. I went to Publix. Hadn't been home for 3 weeks, needed to do a little shopping. I wore a t-shirt that I bought in Hanoi. I was doing the tourist guy. It said Hanoi across the top, had a picture of rickshaw underneath of it. I was pushing my cart out to my truck after shopping. A lady came up and waved her finger in my face, and how dare you wear the shirt of my enemy? I took a step back and my jaw dropped. I'd just spent 3 weeks in Vietnam. I'd never been assaulted like this before. So I gave her a little lowdown like I did with you tonight, why I go to Vietnam. At the end, I said, we've been at peace with Vietnam for 50 years. If we still consider these men our enemies, after 50 years of peace, all the men, women, and children that died in this war did so in vain, because it's a soldier's duty to fight for peace. And her jaw dropped to the floor, and she looked at me, tears in her eyes, and said, nobody ever told me it's okay to let go of the anger. I want to thank you for listening. God bless you, and God bless our beautiful country.